Good morning to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. Thursday now, the 14th of September, 2023. And in today's update, should be pretty short overall because I'm going to go over what to expect, at least the best idea that we have this far out, about 3 days out or so, of landfall and just overall interaction, impacts, etc. What to expect when Lee comes knocking over the next few days for New England. For Atlantic Canada, I'll break it down. I'll give you a couple of hints as to where to look for information that could be helpful to you, especially up in New England, where, thankfully, you are not used to this type of situation, not with hurricanes threatening. Doesn't happen very often, but it is happening now, so I'll kind of point you, hopefully, in the right direction. And we'll take a look ahead after Lee. Hurricane season is going to just keep on going. We have other stuff to watch going forward as well. All right? Let's get to it, shall we? First, satellite animation courtesy of Tropical Tidbits, and you can really see the size of Lee here. And it's a Category 2 hurricane, winds about 100 miles per hour or so. Really spread out all that energy. Bermuda getting affected. Just got a couple pictures sent to me from one of my friends over there that owns the Swizzle. The Swizzle Inn. A great place if you've never been there, and his name is Jay. His wife took a few pictures, and it looks pretty rough out there on the south side of Bermuda. Makes sense because that southerly flow pushing in those big ocean waves, it looks kind of rough out there. So very large wind field, not a particularly intense hurricane, but that energy again is spread out over a large area, and as such that wave energy really spreading out now across a good deal of the eastern parts here of North America. Anywhere that basically faces the ocean, you're getting wave energy from this gigantic wind machine sitting out here that we call Hurricane Lee. There's Margot up in the far northern latitudes, not really bothering anybody except shipping interests. This is eventually going to go on to become Nigel, and then we have some other activity that we need to watch coming off of Africa, so we're going to keep going even after we clear the pattern of Lee in the coming days. So here's the latest from the National Hurricane Center. We do get intermediate advisories, so they are basically every 3 hours now that we're getting information. The air pressure is pretty low, 955 millibars, but the pressure gradient, that is to say the difference in pressure over distance, is more gradual. You understand? So you don't have this perfect eye wall where the pressure gradient over a short distance is very steep. So the winds near the center of Lee, even though they're near 100 miles per hour, we would expect with a pressure of 955 that those winds would be higher, but the gradient is spread out over a larger area. So you have a large area of tropical storm and hurricane force wind, and only smaller areas nearer any deeper thunderstorm activity, what we call convection, that's giving us those 100 mile per hour winds as sampled by the recon planes that go out there. And so that gradient, the difference in pressure over distance being spread out like it is, means that Lee will impact a larger area. That's why we have all these watches and warnings and whatnot up here in, let's just change this over to the 3-day. That just helps to compact things a little bit. But that's why we have the watches and warnings like we do. I guess there's still watches right now, right? Yeah, hurricane watch and tropical storm watch and a storm surge watch, covering a pretty big geographic area, because look at the wind field of Lee. And this isn't precise. It's not like if you're right here and then you go right here, you go from nothing to 34 knot wind. But that just gives you a general idea of the enormity of the wind field now directly impacting Bermuda, and this whole thing is going to head north into this track area that you see, bringing all those conditions up to the northwest Atlantic, and it will affect New England, of course, Atlantic Canada, the Gulf of Maine, the Bay of Fundy, New Brunswick, we got Nova Scotia. Yeah, it'll be an impactful event, but not anything close to a worst case scenario, hopefully. You know, if a particular location has a house that falls into the ocean, or a big tree falls and, you know, causes injury or, you know, God forbid, death, we don't want that, then it is very impactful. When we just don't know, we can't micromanage this down to a specific address. That's why the watches and warnings cover a large area, to give people an idea that something's coming and they need to be ready for it. But ready for what exactly? Well, National Hurricane Center does a good job, and the Canadian Hurricane Center does as well, laying out what to expect. You get your wind speed probabilities of the different 34-knot hurricane force, etc. So tropical storm is over on the right. I would have done it if I was designing this. I would have made tropical storm force on the left, 50-knot, then hurricane force, but that's just me. So the tropical storm force probability you can see there, 50 knots, which is 60 miles per hour, is shrunk. And then, of course, the hurricane force wind probability, still we have a ways to go before those numbers start to go up. Rainfall, U.S. rainfall potential. Overall, not a lot of very heavy rain for New England, with the exception of southeastern Maine and the western parts of Nova Scotia. However, 2 to 4 inches in the darker green color through here. I'll outline it for you in red. You know, that's not nothing, and that could create some localized flooding issues. But luckily, with the cooler North Atlantic waters and Lee going to pass out of the Gulf Stream before getting up here, the rainfall totals won't be ridiculous. That is certainly a good thing, considering how wet it has been in a good part of New England this summer. My printer over there being loud. Why do printers always do that, by the way? It's like several minutes after you print something, they have to make racket right in the middle of me doing this update. Maybe it didn't come through. I got a pretty good microphone. Maybe it did. Whatever, let's continue. Storm surge. And of course, storm surge is when the wind pushes that surge, the ocean on shore. So if you had some water in your hand, or you have a cup, you blow across the top of it, and on the other side, it piles up even just a little bit. That's storm surge. That's all that is. The wave action on top of that inundation, this is above ground level, by the way. 1 to 3 feet, maybe, especially if this comes in at high tide, which, depending on the speed and the timing of the peak winds and so forth, high tide on Saturday, I think, is in the mid-afternoon for a good deal of this area. Your tide ranges up here are pretty significant. And I noticed, too, reading the Weather Service discussion, which we'll talk about in a second, I'll show you where you can find that the astronomical tides are just not particularly high right now. So there's some pretty good news overall. We're not expecting a major coastal inundation event, but some of the more localized areas where you really focus that wind and pile that water up, there could be some areas where you get some flooding, maybe some damage to docks and piers, marine interest, that kind of thing. But it's really going to depend on the wind field and exactly how close Lee tracks to the coast of New England. And we just don't know for sure yet. But every tens of miles will start to really make a difference. But right now, at least from just a general perspective, 1 to 3 feet of additional or of inundation, 2 to 4 feet in Cape Cod Bay. If it's less, great, take it. But at least you were prepared, right? Right, at least you were aware of it. So yeah, good little set of thumbnails up here if you want to check things out yourself. Of course, the key messages are there, bullet points, just to boil things down for you as to what to expect. Then you got the National Weather Service, weather.gov, weather.gov. You can just click on, hopefully you know your geography, you should. By the way, look at how the rest of the country is finally nice and quiet right now. Only over here do we have all of this shenanigans related to Hurricane Lee. So let's just click on eastern Massachusetts and you get an idea. You zoom into the local area coming out of Boston and Norton, and you've got hazardous weather outlook, hurricane local statements, rip current statement. I mean, any one of these you can click on, or you can actually click on the map even more. And let's say you're interested in Plymouth. Hey, I live in Plymouth, or somebody I love lives in Plymouth, whatever, right? I know Phil Klotzbach, Dr. Klotzbach, I don't know if he's from Plymouth, but I certainly know that he has a close tie to Plymouth, Mass. So we'll talk about Plymouth. So you click on Plymouth there in the bigger map, and you have your tropical storm watch and your hurricane local statement. And I'm going to highlight this in orange. This is very, very helpful. I've pointed this out before when we're talking about other coastal areas of the U.S., but again, New England, not exactly used to this. So click on that, and it tells you what to expect. I would have made the formatting so that it's in the middle, but whatever, I'm just being nitpicky. This is written by, some of it is template, but it's overall written by and updated from real people. They do this at the Weather Service office up there. Yes, some of it is template driven, but then they can put in specific information. And it looks wordy and lengthy, but hey, you don't have anything else to do, right? Read it, and this will tell you generally what to expect for your area. All right, this isn't just a broad overview. This boils it down to the area that is covered in here. You know, out of Boston, Norton, Massachusetts. It tells you all your pertinent information, some of the different things to expect. And then the Tropical Storm Watch, remember that was right here. You click on that and it jumps you to there. And it tells you about what to expect and so forth and so on. So it's just a nice way to localize what you are expecting, or if you want to know what to expect. You can also read the forecast discussion, and that gives you, and this is written, typed up by somebody, and they usually put their initials down here. These are real people. These are not chat bots. All right, we're not there yet, thank goodness. And this tells you what to expect. All these different details in here. Again, it's kind of wordy. Some of the terms they use might be a little over your head, but otherwise it's written pretty well so that anybody can understand it, and it just gives you a good idea of what to expect. All right, so to kind of visualize it, let's look at the 6Z Euro, and this is the eastern part of the United States, of course, the western Atlantic. There's Lee down there. This is the 10-meter wind, so we're looking at a good idea of the wind field, and of course the surface pressure. Euro analyzing it pretty much spot on, showing it 956 millibars on this particular resolution of the ECMWF model. And we can move this out hour by hour, actually it's every 3 hours. And you see it passes on to the north generally. Bermuda still has many hours to go through this evening. There's Bermuda right there in the right-hand side of the circulation, so the winds are going to continue to increase. Might get a few scattered power outages in Bermuda. Maybe the Swizzle has a power flicker or two. Maybe Jay has a generator. I'll have to ask him. You got a generator there, buddy? It's a really great place, by the way. It's not far from Grotto Bay, if you're interested in heading over there. It's been there a long time, the Swizzle Inn. Anyway, Lee goes on to the north and eventually starts to come northeast a little bit because that trough, you don't see it in this graphic, but the trough's up here, and it's kind of luring Lee towards it. But the trough lifts out. Lee tries to turn back to the west just a little bit. You see right there. And then this is the key. Early Saturday morning, right around sunrise, that looks to be when the strongest winds will occur across most of New England over here. And then, obviously, southern parts of Nova Scotia up into New Brunswick. Onshore flow here. Let's use a color that pops a little bit better. I guess black will. You got onshore flow going on over here, near and parallel shore, but then you get to Cape Cod Bay, and it's right into Cape Cod Bay, and that's where I am most concerned. And we can click on this to get a little closer look. So at this point, the winds are coming out of the northwest. So let's back it up. This will be the overnight hours, a few hours before sunrise. Still northwest, more northerly overnight. So tomorrow night, Friday night, into early Saturday morning, you get those northerly winds, and then they back to the northwest. And that's where we could really pile up the water in here. That arm, it literally looks like an arm, right? Trying to flex that right arm, I guess. Cape Cod Bay, Dennis. I'll show you. Do I have a map pulled up? I guess I could pull one up if I needed to. But you guys know the geography up there enough. Cape Cod Bay, you have Dennis, you got Orleans, or Orlean. Yeah, Orlean. I don't remember how you pronounce it. I guess I better get it right. Over on the right-hand side of Cape Cod Bay, that's where you can really start to pile up the water. Sassuat Harbor, and just that area where the concave shape could really trap the water like a catcher's mitt. That could be pretty problematic. 2 to 4 feet of inundation, maybe some big waves too. We'll just have to see. If Lee is a little bit more farther away, then those wind impacts and surge impacts will certainly be less. But then along the main coast, I mean, everything, this is generally right along the coast there, so you don't have any onshore flow. The onshore flow's up in Nova Scotia. But the big waves could come in, and, Bar Harbor, elsewhere. Some of that area is pretty rocky, of course. Beautiful big trees. What is it? The Acadia National Forest up there, the park. Beautiful dark sky area when it's clear. Could be pretty windy, and I bet that sounds spectacular amongst all those big trees. Some of those trees could come down. There could be power outages, but again, not the worst case scenario. Think of it as a pretty powerful version of a nor'easter, even though it's not the same kind of setup. All right, just trying to give you an idea of what to expect. Most New Englanders that know the nor'easters, they're hardy. They're prepared for this kind of thing. But, there still could be some people up there vacationing, whatever. They might be new to the region and just want to make sure you're aware of what to expect. So Lee comes on up, makes landfall, at least from the Euro perspective, center crossing the coast in southwest Nova Scotia up through the Bay of Fundy. That'll be interesting to see what happens with the surge up there, especially right here. See these wind barbs, they're coming around, pushing the Bay of Fundy right up into there. Again, if that occurs when the tide is coming in, that could be pretty problematic. I just don't know enough about it to give you details, who lives up here, so forth and so on. I guess we're going to see. Somebody will take some pictures, I am sure. All right, now, like I said, hurricane season not over. Just keeping you aware of what might be coming later on. We'll use blue here. This is the GFS from 6Z this morning. There's Lee, there's Margot. This is our next system that'll develop into Nigel. Watch what happens over the next week or so, if I can make this work. We'll go out to 1 week. Lee comes up into the northwest Atlantic. Margot goes out, and then Nigel develops, approaches Bermuda, and on this particular run, 1 week away, it's only a couple hundred miles southeast of Bermuda. We're going to want to watch that in Bermuda and see what happens. I do notice there's a high pressure area trying to build over here. You know how these things go. A week out, there's your weakness, by the way, right there, that could turn soon to be Nigel out. But if this fills in, we have to watch Bermuda pretty closely. And then there is more activity. You can see it right there trying to get going, coming off the coast of Africa, September 21st. So we're going to keep piling up the ace points, adding to the name storms, or checking them off the list, I guess you could say. And the continuation of this busy hurricane season will continue. All right, let me get over to the exit screen, so to speak, talk to you again, and then time for me to go. Got to head up to New Bern, important family event today, as I have talked about before. But then tomorrow, around mid-afternoon or so, I'm going to jump on a plane here in Wilmington, fly up to Boston, taking several camera systems with me. Basically, I'm going to look at this like I just talked about, like a warm nor'easter. I'll take my rain jacket, but I'm going to wear shorts and t-shirt and have my nice rain jacket on. And Marcel is going to help me, one of our colleagues, and we're going to set some units up down there along Cape Cod Bay. I know of some great locations that we have used in the past, and then we'll probably go up to Provincetown or somewhere like that and get as close as we can to see what we see. I don't have any way to take any wind instrumentation with me, unfortunately. I'd love to know what the wind speeds are, so we'll just have to estimate with our eyeballs and see what we see there. But that's Friday. Tomorrow, fly up. We're going to be up all night tomorrow night, no sleep until sometime Saturday evening. That's just the way it goes. Got to do what you got to do. And I'm glad to have the help of Marcel, who will make it so that I can tolerate all this. All right, so I'll talk about that more tomorrow. I'll do a video tomorrow before I head out, and we'll lay out the game plan. Plus, we will be within 24 hours of all those impacts coming, and we'll know a little bit more about it. Hopefully a lot more. All right, that is it from me for today. You guys have a good rest of your Thursday. From all of us here at HurricaneTrack, thank you for tuning in. I'll talk to you again tomorrow morning.